Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze with the Conscious Resistance Network. And today I'm going to tell you about a really exciting event that I'm participating in next month in Kansas. And I hope that you guys will listen with an open mind, open heart, as I know most of my audience do. But I know there are some of you out there who are going to hear the topic of discussion today and have criticisms and complaints and all sorts of fun things. So we're going to go ahead and address those as quick as we can. But today, my guest who is going to share all about this, as well as her own personal journey, is Sarina Farb of Born Vegan and, of course, the Thrive Alive Vegan Fest. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks so much for doing this and having me on today.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to participate. And yeah, we're going to talk all about that. But as I was saying, I can already hear the fingers typing and the comments section because there's vegan in the title or in the description and people who have all sorts of feelings and things about this. We're going to be discussing this amazing event you're putting on. We're going to hear from some of your personal story. But just right off the bat, if somebody's instinct is to say, oh my gosh, veganism, it's a death cult, it's Bill Gates funded, or whatever sort of feelings they might have, maybe we could just start right there and tell me, why should somebody who isn't vegan or is maybe even anti-vegan be interested in Thrive Alive?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I hear this one a lot too. And I think it's it's based on a false dichotomy and co-option. That's one of my favorite terms. I think veganism used to be the hippie alternative. I want to eat healthier so I can opt out of the medical system and avoid, having to be on, drugs and medications and have, freedom to live my life and be healthy. And then at some point in the last, 5 or 10 years in particular, that really started changing. And now we see this association of like, oh, vegans are the corporate people. Bill Gates is trying to force us all to eat lab-grown meat burgers and things like this. And that is corporate interests like Bill Gates trying to co-opt a movement so that they can make profit off of it. But that is not the heart of veganism. And that is not everyone in the vegan movement by any means. There are lots of people in the vegan world, including myself, that are passionate about freedom and alternative health and opting out of systems and not into top-down corporate changes or policy change, and that want to see, sustainable regenerative backyard farming practices, but with plants. Because at the heart of veganism is about nonviolence and freedom. And it's saying, if we want freedom and bodily autonomy for ourselves and our society, then let's extend our circle of compassion and give that to our fellow earthlings that we share the planet with. And not to mention that the pharmaceutical industry and corporations and big ag industry are all deeply connected. So if we also really want to care about and prioritize alternative health and sustainable agriculture, it becomes really clear that eating plant-based and the heart of veganism are one of the best ways to combine all of that into one. And it doesn't have to be this top-down corporate lab-grown meat thing at all.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That's a great answer. And I appreciate you humoring me and just sort of jumping right into that. And yeah, I 100% agree with what you said there. And I think that is where, that's where my veganism comes from. That might be a surprise to some folks in the audience because it's not necessarily something I discuss all the time. It is a personal sort of thing to me, but I also feel very strongly about the reasons that I choose to be vegan, and in particular animal liberation. So we're going to talk about all these fun things today. And let's go ahead now and take a step back and share more about your work with my audience. You and I got connected during COVID 1984, as I like to call it. Yep. You were one of the speakers at the early version before we turned it to the People's Reset. It was the Greater Reset. And we had you come down and speak, and was really grateful for that. And yeah, and so I know you do a lot of different work, and you've done different things over the years prior to getting involved into Thrive Alive. So maybe you could share a bit about your personal journey and your background.
Yeah, thank you. So my personal journey, for those, it says in the name, but I go by Born Vegan online. And that's because I have the unique background of actually having been born and raised vegan from birth. So I've been in this movement a very, very long time, seen lots of different iterations of it. And I'm also very holistic, and that has also kind of been the root of what I do. So my work with Born Vegan, which has been lots of different things, from education and content creation to health and lifestyle coaching to organizing community events, bringing people together. That's something I'm deeply passionate about. But holistic veganism has kind of been the root of all of the work I've done. And that's because for me, while I am first and foremost vegan for the animals and for animal liberation, I also think it's very this is my spiritual perspective, you could say. It's very telling to me that the diet and lifestyle that doesn't hurt animals is also one of the healthiest for us and the planet and our ecosystem, and that it just kind of all makes sense when it fits together like that. So I'm deeply passionate about the health side of things as well as the environmental and ecological side, and really like to bring all of that together to help people live their happiest and healthiest lives and thrive mentally, physically, emotionally, socially, without having to exploit animals. So that's kind of the big picture of what I do, which then led me, of course, into, we did some Vegans for Freedom work together, which comes from that holistic angle. During COVID, I, noticed that the vegan movement was being split a lot. And to me, these issues of bodily autonomy and health freedom and human liberation fit perfectly with animal liberation. And it didn't make sense to be going that corporate route. And so now I've kind of taken all of that work and am creating my first ever festival that has been inspired. I must say, like, going to, at the time, the Greater Reset was an incredible experience. It was one of the best events like that I've been to. And I loved it. I had so much fun there and speaking at it, and the people and the community. And I've been to vegan events. I've been to raw fruitarian events. I've been to music festivals. I've been to all kinds of different events, and really wanted to bring that holistic element together to create community and empower people through an in-person event that had education, holistic health, community, delicious, healthy, organic, plant-based foods, and people and speakers like yourself to really give people this holistic, well-rounded experience of veganism.
Hold on. I mean, you're born vegan. I thought you weren't even supposed to be able to survive to this point. You clearly have made it out of childhood and into adulthood. Let's pause there for a moment before we talk all about Thrive Alive, because again, I know there'll be people who are skeptical of that. Maybe you could share just, have you faced any challenges growing up as a vegan, whether that's health related or just has your veganism evolved? Because I mean, we both know that there are people who jump into veganism. Obviously your experience would be different being raised this way, but people who jump into veganism and they do it for a short period of time. They eat the Bill Gates burgers, they eat all the processed stuff, and they're like, I'm super unhealthy. Now I'm going full carnivore or something. They go the exact opposite, which is such a weird trend I'd love to get into later. But yeah, I mean, could you speak to that? Have you had any kind of challenges growing up as being a vegan, or certain things that you've had to do to make sure that you maintain your health, or has it really not been a challenge like people might think?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the biggest challenge is the social and emotional part, honestly. I really haven't faced many health issues, but growing up and doing something so different, especially, this was 30 years ago in the early 90s, veganism was, much more unheard of. And anybody, kids in school doing anything different, eating different, people would make comments and nobody knew what tofu was. And, would say things like that. And so growing up in a world that didn't see the injustice that I saw in front of me really was the hardest part for me. But at the same time, I'm so grateful for the experience because I feel like it really taught me to think critically for myself and sort of question everything around me at a really young age. Because I can remember, I did competitive gymnastics actually for like 7 years when I was younger. And I was one of the only girls on my team to make it to the level I was at that, didn't have a serious injury or break a bone at the time. And still, I remember, and even back then, I tried to avoid going to doctors. My parents avoided going to doctors and involving the mainstream medical system as much as possible. But occasionally I'd have to go for a physical or something for gymnastics. And I remember going and having a doctor hear that I had never drank cow's milk or had meat and freaking out and saying, how can you be doing gymnastics? You must have really weak bones and you're going to be nutrient deficient. And he wanted to run a bunch of blood tests on me. And my mom was like, okay, you can do that. And he did. And he was shocked when my numbers came back and, they weren't just okay, but I was thriving. I didn't have any nutrient deficiencies. I wasn't calcium deficient. I didn't have weak bones. And he was so convinced that was, just not possible. And so those early experiences made me much more skeptical of the mainstream medical system, seeing and having these firsthand experiences of recognizing the power of the lobbying of the dairy industry and how involved they are in writing everything from federal nutrition programs to, even med school curriculums. And so I remember my mom would come in, she came in to this doctor's office and literally handed him a stack of peer-reviewed published studies on the healthfulness of plant-based diets. And he was shocked. He'd never seen any of this data or any of this evidence or science in his life. He just, was of the belief that I was going to be unhealthy. So I had that experience. And the other thing I will say too is my mom likes to joke that it was much easier to be a healthy vegan back then in the 90s because there weren't all of the products that exist today. You couldn't go into just any store and find, highly processed plant-based burgers and ice creams. There were a few back then, but just not the variety and not the options. So we were eating, pretty much, entirely home-cooked, whole foods from scratch, food. Things like tofu sandwiches, vegetable stir fries, lentil curries, which have been around forever and ever. And the way that, before it became this popular trend that people were eating plant-based. So we did eat like that. And when I got to college, though, was the first time when I really started I had my junk food vegan phase. I went to a college where they did have vegan options in the dining hall, but not a ton of other options around. And, I started eating things like Sour Patch Kids and artificially colored things because I grew up not ever eating those. I never had like a Coke or a Pepsi or a regular soda until I got to college. So my parents were very health conscious from that holistic perspective, in addition to just being vegan. And so then I got to college and I started eating all of these things, and I did some traveling, and I always stayed vegan while I was traveling, but there would be times where I was living abroad and I was literally living off of like French fries and potato chips and like jars of peanut butter. And I could have done better. I actually had an apartment in one of those situations where I had a kitchen, but I was traveling, I was busy, and I just wanted to go out to bars and pubs with my friends and eat alongside them. And so I ended up, living on greasy, deep fried food and lots of packaged and unhealthy stuff. And that was one of the times in my life that I felt worst. I came back from my study abroad and was very out of shape and felt very unhealthy. And that was kind of the first time in my adult life that I got really inspired to then, go back to eating healthy and really prioritizing my health and wellness and healthy plant-based foods from a personal reasoning and approach, and not just like, oh, this is what my family's done, or this is how my parents raised me. But aside from, the normal, little things like that, and when I was eating unhealthy, I've really had no major health issues. And I've also never really, I actually made it, this might surprise people, I made it until about 2 or 3 years ago without ever taking a single pharmaceutical product in my life.
Wow, that's awesome. Congratulations on that. Yeah, thank you for sharing some of your personal story. And I know everybody's journey is different, but I do think it's important for us, especially because there's so much propaganda and people doing veganism wrong, that, there's a lot out there of just like, as I said, like I've heard these things like it's a death cult, you're wasting away. Like I had somebody try to criticize me years ago. It was about veganism, and they saw a picture of me when I was like 18 or 19, which also happened to be a period where I was on a lot of drugs, including drugs that made me lose a lot of weight. I was the most unhealthiest I've ever been. And they tried to claim that I looked healthier then. I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm doing a lot better now. But nevertheless, I know it can be a challenge. And especially like you said, that's a kind of a good point about there's an abundance of vegan options these days, depending on where you live in most places. But that doesn't mean they're necessarily the healthiest options. And so we still stick to like here at our house, like cooking at home for the most part. We'll go out every now and then and enjoy a vegan restaurant or something like that, or vegan options at a different restaurant. But for the most part, yeah, the way I feel like most aligned with my vegan diet and just my health is cooking whole food, plant-based, at home as much as possible. So it's great to hear that from you. You mentioned one other thing I want to dive into for a moment, the Vegans for Freedom. And this is something that myself and Miriam and some other friends and you were involved in during COVID. And for me, it was kind of coming out of this desire to, I guess, connect more with my vegan community out there, which I have some vegan friends, but I don't necessarily feel like I operate in the vegan space, let's say, so much like online. Like I see some things out there, but it's not my main avenue. But I was noticing during COVID, like, okay, there's a lot of people who are vegan, but seem to be going towards the Bill Gates burgers and the processed Impossible Beyond and all that stuff. And it felt like, okay, let's plant a flag of like, okay, we're vegans, but we're awake to these agendas, like you were talking about earlier in the beginning, the corporatization of veganism and a lot of these false messages. And we can be vegan while also calling out the COVID nonsense. We can be vegan while also calling out the Great Reset and this other sort of agendas that have been out there. What was your perspective or your experience like during COVID? Because I know that there were, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the COVID injections were not vegan. And so there was some vegans who were just kind of against it for that general reason, but then they might also still be buying into some of the larger narratives. What was your experience being a vegan during that whole thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. It feels so long ago now in some ways, but I honestly was very shocked. Like I said, like having grown up vegan in the way I did, I associated veganism with being the hippie alternative, opt out of the system. My grandfather, actually, this was kind of going back to how my parents got into veganism. He actually avoided having like bypass surgery and major heart issues back in the 80s by adopting a plant-based diet against, like he went against his doctor's, wishes or recommendations for surgery and wanted to find an alternative that didn't involve drugs and surgery. And so that had kind of been my association with veganism before COVID. It was the people that understood that the medical system was biased towards the pharmaceutical industry, towards big ag, that, so I really just viewed veganism as this alternative system. And I thought that most vegans, because they could see through sort of one form of propaganda from big ag, that they were going to be more critical thinkers and more likely to see past other stuff. So it was actually like incredibly shocking and a huge, like, disturbing wake-up call to me that was not the case, because I, am very much in the vegan community online, in person. Those are the circles that I've grown up in and been part of. And so it was very wild for me to realize that not only were many of the people that I had grown up and knew and thought were critical thinkers going along with the pharmaceutical industry and the propaganda there. And I mean, and it was very tough, actually. There were lots of people, lots of relationships that were changed, damaged, like people, people were experiencing this in all kinds of communities. I just truly didn't expect it from the vegan community, because I associated veganism with being this alternative critical thinking. Like I thought we got it. I thought people understood that, all these systems were kind of the same. And so that was why I was very excited to see, what you're doing with Vegans for Freedom. And it kind of drew me to that, because I was really looking to connect with other vegans that weren't going to be hateful or, canceling people or excluding people for, you know, their choices around the jabs. And there definitely were people that, you know, I know opted out because of the ethics around it, but it was predominantly like either you were critical thinking and willing to accept people's individual choices or not go along with it, or you were just a vegan that kind of fell hook, line, and sinker for the propaganda.
Yeah, I feel like you said that this happened in a lot of different communities, right? I mean, we're speaking about veganism here, but I can definitely speak of like the libertarian community, which is where I spent a lot of time early on in my activism, and even some people who would call themselves anarchists, and finding disappointment during COVID in that area, and just different sectors of society where you realize, okay, they get this piece of the puzzle, but then they're completely buying the propaganda in these other areas. So very important. And I'm glad that brought us together and made me aware of all the great work you're doing. And now you are continuing your great work, and you are doing Thrive Alive, which I'm super excited about. Let's go ahead and tell everybody about it. This is happening next month, actually almost 30 days as we're recording this, September 18th to the 22nd, Timber Lakes Retreat, Kansas. I'm super excited, guys. I will be there. I'll be speaking. I'll be performing. There's going to be lots of other great things going on. So tell us all about this.
Yeah, so like I said, this is kind of inspired by all of the different events that I've gone to and, you know, enjoyed, and taking all of, you know, the different things I've enjoyed. I partnered with a friend that I met at the Woodstock Fruit Festival, and, you know, she's kind of like the queen of fun, we'll call her. And so I've been to lots of like educational vegan events and conferences. And then I went to the Woodstock Fruit Festival, which has like all of this fun and campfire and sort of summer camp vibes. And I met her, and we really were like, how can we bring together all of these different elements into one thing? So it's this very unique, like I'd say part health and wellness retreat, right? Like we've got yoga and fitness classes and meditation and all of that stuff. And we have food included, 3 buffet style meals each day, all plant-based, all like, you know, made from scratch. And then it's also like part conscious music festival. You'll be performing. We've got our headliner, Mike Love, will be playing reggae music, and Paul Isaac will be there doing some folk music. And then there'll be lots of like bonfire jam sessions and music workshops. So we've got kind of that music festival vibe, as well as like camp out. And then of course, speakers and keynote speeches on all aspects of, you know, kind of holistic veganism. So we've got the health and nutrition speakers, we have the fitness people, we have the sustainability and environmental folks, and then we have kind of the conscious living and holistic big picture, and then of course ethics and animal liberation. So we've got all of that, like just such an incredible lineup of topics and workshops. And the goal is really to have a fantastic, amazing, fun, connecting time, but to really walk away feeling inspired and empowered to live your happiest and healthiest life and help create a happy and healthy world for all beings, humans and non-human animals included. So it's really, and the other thing is, it is an entirely sober event. So unlike, you know, a lot of music festivals out there, like, you know, there's no alcohol served, and we're asking people to come and be their authentic selves. One way of putting it is, we believe that the medicine is within us. It's within our breath. It's within our food. It's within our hearts and our connection. And so we're asking everyone to kind of be on the same plane, to be present and authentically connect with each other and build community and learn and thrive and celebrate together. Celebrate life and getting high just on life. And that's kind of the big picture of what we're doing.
I'm very much looking forward to this. And I appreciate each one of those different elements that you brought there. For everybody who's watching on the screen, I'm showing from the website why attend Thrive Alive and what all comes with the ticket, which you just discussed there. But I want to just highlight 2 components that I think are really cool and important to do. Like you mentioned, the sober aspect of it. And I think that for some people that can sometimes be a challenge, maybe because, you know, people associate going out to a festival or partying with having a drink or having a smoke or whatever it is that they prefer to do. And there's always, of course, a time and a place for that, if that's your preference. But I think it is a good, and I'm one of those people. I enjoy, having a drink from time to time and those sorts of things. But I also like going into spaces like this for this very specific reason, to kind of step in that container of like, I don't need those things to have fun. I don't need those, to be around other people who are drinking alcohol or whatever to enjoy myself. I can just come together and kind of enjoy what's happening and be fully present in that. And I think that is, I think it's a challenge for some people, but it's a challenge I want to invite everybody who's hearing this to accept and to come experience in person, especially if that's new to you. And then the other piece that I think is really cool is just including the family activities and kind of bringing that all together. That's definitely something we're trying to do more with the People's Reset as well. Because if we're really trying to build conscious, empowered movements, whether vegan or whatever sort of niche community people might be a part of, I do think it's sometimes we, especially as organizers, we can get so exclusively focused on creating experiences for people who don't have children and who can stay out all night or can, have, it's just a different experience. And it's not necessarily that one is right and one is wrong, but when you create a container that does have all of those elements, then it's going to bring more diversity of people. And obviously parents care about their kids, they care about the future. They want to come hear from speakers and enjoy music and do all these fun things. But a lot of times if those things aren't considered, then parents are like, oh, well, this isn't for us, so we'll just stay home, and they kind of miss out. But also we miss out on seeing the kids running around and having a great time and watching them. And for me, that's always a reminder of like why I do the work that I do. And in fact, some of my favorite events that I've been to, especially favorite performances I've done, or when I can come do my music in front of little kids and talk to them and kind of, rap to them and just communicate these ideas, because obviously they're absorbing and they're taking in all the things that are being discussed around them. And they're just, we're planting seeds in their mind. And I know that is, it's such an important thing to do for the coming generation. So I really appreciate those components of that. And I also think it's important, obviously being in a vegan event, that you have food being provided. And I think it's like the way you explained to me before, it sounds like it's going to be a mix of festival, conference, and then summer camp. Like everybody coming out, having their swimming, boating, hiking, trails, all this sorts of stuff. And then the bonfires and the music and everything. I'm super excited about it. Could you share, I don't want you to hurt anybody's feelings, but what are you most excited about? Speakers, musicians, is there anybody that you just can't wait to, see them come out and do their thing?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm really excited to see Paul Isaac perform. I love his music and I love just the vibe and energy of it and what he sings about. Mike Love for that matter too. I'm just a little bit more of a folk person, I think, personally, than reggae. I like it all. I like all the conscious music. But I'm super excited to get to hear him in the context. For me, things are so much more meaningful in connected community where I feel like we're coming together around shared values. So it's like one thing just to go to a fun festival and enjoy music I like. And for me, it just has this totally transformative, different feeling when it's like, oh, we're living the things that we're singing about and talking about, and we're all here because we're interested in and care about similar things and values. And that goes for speakers too. I like to tell people when they sort of don't understand, oh, why should I get information in person instead of just watching a video or documentary online or something? And I just can tell you personally firsthand from having sat in rooms, listening to speakers, hearing a million other, really good speakers, it is an entirely different experience to sit in a room or outdoors or a collective group of people all being moved and hearing a speaker share their information than sitting behind a screen and watching it. It can be the exact same information and you can be moved by both. Documentaries and videos are a powerful tool. But for me, there is nothing that matches that power of that collective energy of us all experiencing something, being moved by something together physically in person. It has such a transformative power. Particularly when it comes to even just health and nutrition things. I can hear some speaker online and be like, oh yeah, that's good information. I should eat healthier. And then I hear it in person. I hear someone's personal story of transformation. And I'm like, wow, yeah, I really need to start exercising more again. I really got to remember to prioritize. Like, it's just this completely different experience.
Yeah, I love that. And I will echo that as well, that there's nothing like in-person experiences. And this is one of the sort of things I've been trying to hammer on more recently, and especially, you know, over the years that I've been hosting events, that the internet is great and it's a beautiful tool. And obviously it's allowing us to communicate right now and broadcast this to people all over the world. But I think too many people get comfortable with just experiencing the world through our social media apps or through, you know, podcasts and whatever else. Those are great tools. And I say this as somebody who produces documentaries and makes podcasts, but still I would encourage you to not sit at home and kind of wait till, you know, to watch the talks online or to just get the information that maybe you can get elsewhere, but to come in person. And maybe even more, especially if you're the kind of person, because this is one thing I hear often is, I'm not very good in crowds. I'm not very outgoing, or, you know, I'm, you know, whatever. I struggle with those things as well. I can totally empathize with that. But the only way to get past that is to get out of your comfort zone, come in person, connect with people. And every time that I've found in my experience, just as a human, but also as an activist, that I push past that little bit of doubt or just like, I'll just wait till next time or whatever might come up. When I do go in person, I meet some great people. I always end up realizing like, okay, this is why I needed to come here. I needed to make that connection. I needed to have that experience. You know, I just needed to come have some fun, whatever it may be. And I think that is, there's just no way to replicate that through the internet. There's just really is no way. You have to come in person. You have to connect to people. And to your other point you made about like the sort of special feeling you get when you're in a crowd of people. Like, sure, you can go to any sort of mainstream music festival or art festival, whatever, and hear some artists you might like. But then generally speaking, you kind of look around and you're like, well, okay, we all like this same band, but they're definitely not on the same page as these important issues I care about, right? And that's one thing. But then it's a great experience to be in a space like Thrive Alive and to be like, these people, we might not agree on 99, you know, there's maybe a couple of things we could disagree on, but for the most part, we're on the same page. We have aligned values. We're here to celebrate that. And I've seen this with different events that I've organized from small to big, that when you create that space for people, people show up and they feel less alone, which is so important right now. They feel like, oh, okay, there are other people who have similar values and who think like I do, or who are at least aiming in the same direction. And we don't always get that when we're in our normal everyday lives. In fact, a lot of people, I think, work jobs and have family and different kind of communities in their day-to-day life that don't align with their values. And so they do end up feeling very alone. So I just want to encourage everybody, if that's something you felt or you've battled with, like, this could be an opportunity to come in person and to meet other people who are aligned and who are focusing on building a better world. And I'll just share a bit about what I'm going to be offering. I will be performing music, which I'm very grateful. And I'm grateful to you for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to do so. And of course, my partner, Miriam Gomez, will be there. She's going to be sharing some meditation. She's really excited about that as well. And I'm going to be giving 2 presentations that I'm excited to share because I like to challenge people in all the communities I go in. And I'm going to be speaking about, like you've said a couple of times, holistic veganism. And, you know, for those who might be wondering, like, what does that even mean? You know, the way I look at it is this term holistic, when you really understand it, it means understanding whole systems, right? So you're not singularly focused on one piece of the puzzle. So in this context, how can veganism or animal liberation, how do we maybe even go beyond that? How do we think about that in a truly holistic fashion? And so that I'm going to speak about some of those ideas and how I think, from my perspective, veganism and the fight for animal liberation is actually just one component of a much bigger fight for liberation of humanity and for the planet itself. So I'm excited to share that. And then I'll also, of course, be sharing about the exit and build strategy, which much of my audience is familiar with, and will probably be new to some folks in this audience, and why I think it's something that in many ways vegans are already doing, because vegans understand you want to vote with your dollar so you don't support businesses that are harming animals. Well, what would happen if we took that idea and we applied it to every area of our life? You know, not just our food and not just, you know, money and things like that, but how do we start thinking about the institutions we operate with, whether that's government or banks or corporations or whatever. And so I'm excited to dive deep into these ideas and meet some cool people. And I will be bringing my books and shirts and all kinds of fun things. So if people are interested, if you're out there and you're my audience, and I've heard from a few of you already that you're vegan and you're excited to come to this, I really, really want to emphasize, guys, make it. Come out, hang out. It'll be worth your time. It'll be worth your energy. I know that you and your team, Sarina, are doing so much behind the scenes, and as I mentioned a moment ago, you're down to the final month. So how are you feeling as you prepare to welcome everybody to come have this experience?
Getting so excited. We're putting the finishing touches on the schedule, which will be out very soon. And it's so exciting looking at that and thinking about what we've created and are going to be creating and all the different workshops. And yeah, so I'm just very excited and looking forward to seeing everyone and gathering together in person.
Yes, I'm excited for it, guys. The website is thrivealivefest.com. Of course, it'll be in the show notes if anybody wants to go check that out, check out the lineup, get your accommodations figured out, get your tickets, all those important things. You got 30 days to do it, and I hope to see you guys out there. I'm super stoked. I'm excited to connect with Mike Love. We've spoke a couple times through his management. We were going to have him come perform at the People's Reset before, but it never happened. So this will be really cool to come hang out and hear his music and hear some of the other speakers. There's definitely people who I'm not familiar with, which I always enjoy because I like going into a space where I'm going to get to meet new people and make new connections and have some good food, run around, be a kid for a few days, and just have a good time. So I'm really, really stoked on this. I want to ask you one more closing question. Before we do, is there anything else you'd like to share about Thrive Alive? Anything else people need to know?
The last thing I was going to say when you were touching on, community and people kind of coming out of their comfort zone is I've noticed there's a big difference at different events I've been to. And some of them, sometimes the more conferencey ones, but others kind of cultivate, like a cliquish, who's cool enough, whatever, to be their vibe versus other ones that don't. And I can always sort of judge a space and how I feel, based on that. Like, oh, do I feel like I'm not cool enough if I don't have X, Y, or Z? And, like your event was one that was just so warm and welcoming. And I love being in those spaces. And we are very, very intentionally creating that environment with what we're doing. We are building it and we are having workshops and intentional activities and things kind of built into the entire schedule that if you're someone that doesn't know anyone and you're worried about coming alone, I would say do it. You will walk away with new best friends. Like this is not going to be a cliquish who's who environment. This is going to be one of the most warm, welcoming, intentionally building connection and community environments, regardless of where you are on your personal health journey, vegan journey, wherever you are in that, we welcome everyone. And we are very consciously cultivating an environment that will be warm and welcoming and connect people with one another. So yeah, just want to say, come alone, come with family too. That's great. But don't be afraid to come alone.
I love it. Check it out, guys. thrivealivefest.com. It will be in the show notes. The last question I wanted to ask you is if we started out, of course, with addressing people who might have some criticisms or concerns or, anger towards vegans. But if somebody's made it to this part of the interview, you've listened to everything here and you're still here with us. If somebody's listening to this and they're not vegan, or maybe they're now becoming vegan curious, do you have any book or documentary recommendations you might make? I know there's a lot of vegan documentaries increasingly over the years, but anything that you think sticks out to you that might be a good starting place?
That is a great question. I think one of my favorites is Eat Like You Care by Gary Francione. It's a very short, small book, and it makes a very clear, compelling case, kind of like what you're talking about voting with your dollar, about if we care about freedom and compassion and justice, and not hurting others, be they human or non-human, that we can impact that with our food choices. And it's just very simple and straightforward. And it's a fantastic starter book for understanding kind of animal liberation.
Wonderful. I'll definitely put a link to that in the show notes if anybody wants to go check it out. All right. My guest today has been Sarina Farb with Born Vegan and Thrive Alive Fest. I'm so excited to see you very soon, Sarina, and thank you for all the work that you are doing in the world and your personal life and that you will continue to do in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here with us. All right, guys. As always, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace.